Hey everyone, this is Matt from howtogardendesign.com. Today's video, I want to take you through something that I want to do a lot more often, which is take you through examples of good landscape design or good landscape architecture. So, for today's project, I want to look at Teardrop Park in Manhattan by Michael van Valkenburg Associates Inc. And this was completed in 2006. Now, one thing I think this project does extremely well that many other projects don't is it considers how the target audience will actually use the space. And that's really, really important. Why is that important? For two reasons. Most people will end up building and spending a lot of money on expensive spaces that you don't really use to their full potential. And a good example of that is a swimming pool. I'm not saying don't get a swimming pool, I'm just saying that if you think about how you or whoever your target audience is for that particular activity, if you think about how they actually use the space, you can often end up tailoring it much more effectively and much more cost effectively as well. So don't go out and get some enormous swimming pool if you're never going to use it and it's only there for the grandkids and you end up spending more time maintaining it than you do actually using it. And that's a pretty common problem. Another example is where people create a space that is way too large and difficult for them to maintain in the long term, such as a vegetable garden that you see here. Sure, this is beautiful to look at and everyone loves the idea of growing their own food and produce, but when it comes down to it, the amount of watering, weeding, fertilizing, and just actual turnover and maintenance that a garden requires can be a bit of a challenge. And I know that firsthand, where I've tried to do that a few times and end up just losing interest and failing, which sounds weird coming from someone who likes gardens, but anyway, that's beside the point. Point being that if you don't put the thought in early about how you, if you're the main user, will actually use the space, or whoever it is, if it's for your kids, whatever, doesn't matter how they're actually going to use the space, you will often end up with mistakes and things that you don't necessarily want to continue, and things that become chores rather than, fun activities. So let's have a look at this project. As I said, Teardrop Park. Here is a really interesting view. All these images, by the way, I've put links in the description below. Most of them are from the MVVA website, but there are a couple of articles here and there. This is from the website, and this is a nice example, a nice kind of perspective view of the park itself. We're not going to go into all the different bits and pieces. I really want to break this down into three core elements and how the designers use these three core elements to make the space more suitable for their target audience, which, as I said, is kids. So the first one of those is materials. So let's have a look at that. One thing they did with materials is they wanted to be sustainable in how they source them. So they sourced all their materials from within 500 miles of New York City. And you can see that here. You've got this lovely stone at the back, native plants that are nearby, and all this timber as well, and all these trees, plus sand, water, a few other bits and pieces. The thing I really like about it is not just the fact they were sustainably sourced, it's that they've taken these materials because their target audience, kids who live in the inner city, don't often have access to these kind of things, right? There's many kids in the surrounding area who probably don't have the opportunity to go out and explore and actually interact and feel and touch and play amongst these kind of materials all that often. And I think that was one of the driving forces, one of the reasons, instead of doing a generic playground, which would have been effective, easy, and ticked a lot of boxes, the designers kind of went left field a little bit and they said, we're going to build a playground. We're going to include all these spaces that we'll look at next that actually allow kids to do the things you want to do at a playground, but we're going to do it in our way. We're going to do it with different natural materials, which I think is really cool. Again, you've got these giant stonework here as well. Water, another really interesting, fun material. You can see everything's really shallow, so it allows the kids to kind of wade through and wander through. Benches to climb and sit on, really well thought out, using natural materials, which again is something a little bit different. You've still got your open spaces where you can have probably, different activities, be it sport, whatever it is, sitting, reading, picnics, all those kind of things. And you can see that really lovely stone wall that we'll look at in the background as well. This is that wall. And as you can see, they've actually got little pipes that run through the wall that just let water stream out. And in summer, that creates something of an interesting little contrast, which I think is quite nice. Kids, again, can run along and, run their handle on the wall as well. But where I think it's really interesting is you can see in winter, it freezes over. And this introduces another material that the kids can interact with. Not that they don't get access to snow or ice, but this is a different way, right? This is where you've got ice cascading down, forming different patterns, introduces another element of seasonality to the project that, again, is something you can always think about including in your own designs as well. Lastly, looking at this wall, it gives you the idea that there's strata. You know, the idea of they've cut open a hole into the ground and you can see all these layers of soil and rock and stone and everything kind of layered there, which is quite interesting. But what I like more about this kind of wall, and it probably is better shown in this photo, is they've taken natural materials, but they've used them in a playful manner. So they haven't tried to imitate a natural environment. They've taken natural things, but done them in a more playful, whimsical kind of way. I mean, the impression I get from this is these rocks are all kind of propped up like dominoes and someone just knocked them over and they all tipped over. And what I really like about that is that, again, it invites kids in particular to want to climb and interact with the space. This isn't a passive border. This is something that's active and that kids can kind of go and interact with and play with. I'm not sure how many adults would feel too good about it, but for kids in particular, I think this is something that many kids would want to get up and climb over while their parent is holding their hand. So I do really like that aspect of this project. So natural materials used in interesting ways. So the next one we want to look at, I mentioned before the idea of having activity spaces. This is still a playground. And what they've done again is really interesting in that they're using those natural materials, but they're still incorporating elements that most people would be familiar with. So you've got your slide, quite an interesting, nice slide. You've got like a mini sandpit area, and there's another sandpit for smaller kids as well. And again, it's so easy to just go, all right, we'll get a slide, we'll just get the usual ladder to go up to the slide and go down. But no, they've used their natural materials, they've done it in such a way that it's still engaging and interesting for kids and plenty of places to sit and relax, but they're still allowing these spaces to exist. They're not, again, trying to imitate a natural environment where there are no slides. They're saying, well, it's still going to be a playground, we're still going to cater to children, but we're going to use those natural materials to do it. And I guess in terms of spaces, this is one of the activities that many kids would be interested in. Another good example, you've got a wading area. Again, you've got a nice flat surface, you've got the little bubblers that stick out there, and the kids are having a great time. You've even got kind of footpaths and bits and pieces that are happy to get wet, rocks to clamber over. Again, it's a playful space using interesting materials that many kids wouldn't necessarily, have a lot of access to. And just another view of that where you've again got your kind of wading area. I don't know how well you can see it behind me. Let's have a look at that. Oh, wrong one. There we go. So you can see this kind of wading area behind. Again, plenty of places to sit and relax if you're an adult, but still, really interesting use of spaces that they can do there. So the third one, bring myself back there. The third one that we want to look at is scale. And this to me is the most interesting aspect of the project. And it's what actually got me attracted to the project in the first place. Let's see if this works. Here we go. So I mentioned before, a lot of kids don't have these materials just around them in general. And so introducing them into the park is one way to give kids an opportunity to interact and explore in amongst these bushes, basically. And this is a perfect encapsulation of that. Again, I'm going to shrink myself just to make it a bit easier to see. This is a great encapsulation of that because you can see these kids are kind of wandering around on the logs. There's freedom to fall off and explore amongst all the different bushes. Sure, you might get a couple of scratches here and there, but broadly speaking, it's relatively safe. But it's also very different to a lot of the surrounding concrete jungle that they would have. This, again, I really like this wall. Again, with the scale component. So this not only invites you to kind of clamber up and climb over it, and again, it's really playful, right? This doesn't look like anything that you would really see in nature. It looks like someone's kind of carved this out and layered it. But this young woman here can kind of just see over the top, if you think about that line of sight. But if you're a child and you're walking through this space, this is a canyon. You can't see what's past these bends, but as an adult, you can definitely see over the top of things. And that's the same with the lawn. So I haven't really looked at the lawn very closely, but it kind of undulates. It's not a flat level surface. There's a bit of slope and there's little hills and hillocks through it. And again, same concept, where as a child, as you're running down along this lawn and you kind of go up the slope, you can't really see what's over the other side. Everything's a mystery to you. Whereas for adults, it's easy because you can just look straight over the top. And it's these tiny little differences that I think they've added to this project where you go, yep, they've actually really thought about how kids will move through these spaces. So not just making sure things are small enough they can clamber over them safely. There's no massive gaps to jump or fall off. It's even down to the fact that as an adult walking down this footpath, you can see over the top and everything's fine. You can see and make sure that your kids are relatively safe. But for the kids themselves, shrunken down as they are, they can't see all this stuff. And so for them, it's a lot more interesting and playful. And here again is that really lovely view. So See if that takes us back. Look, that's really it. I really like this project, as I said, because it uses these three things. So you can't even see this one, can we? Let's get rid of that. It uses materials, activities, and scale in a really interesting way to cater to its target audience. So that's the project. I really, really like it. Very different to just grabbing, a generic park and then plonking down some sort of playset in there. I think this is a much more engaging way to kind of, introduce these kind of elements and things to kids so they can kind of run around. So that's all good, but how do you use this in your own project? It can be challenging, but again, it just comes back to really thinking about how you, if you're the main user, or how whoever the main user is, will actually interact with the space. So maybe you've got elderly parents or relatives who have mobility issues. Well, then you've got to think about, okay, maybe we need to have less steps throughout our land, whether we're on a slope or whether it's flat. Fewer steps, more ramps, more resting places, things like that, right? Something that's easy for people with mobility to get from point A to point B, or mobility issues, I should say, to get from point A to point B. Or maybe you do have a lot of kids, so maybe it is about creating these little pockets of space that they can run through and explore. Or maybe you're a keen, avid gardener, or maybe you're not, but you still want that kind of thing. It's about recognizing what you're realistically going to do with a space, and then kind of going from there and going, all right, how am I actually going to work, right? Am I the person who's going to be out in the garden, 3 hours a day and doing all the bits and pieces that need to be done? Or am I the kind of person who's going to wish I had a vegetable garden, make this an enormous one, plant everything, and then within 2 years it's just going to be a garden of weeds, right? So really about thinking how you or whoever the user is will actually use the space. And look, that's it. Hopefully for moving forward, I'm going to give you more videos of examples of good garden design, be it locally to me or just projects from around the place. We'll pick apart what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and we'll see whether or not you can take some tips out of that and use them in your own landscape design. So check out my website, howtogardendesign.com, and feel free to subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff. You know how it goes. And I'll see you next time.